So I read the book called Impossible Saints by Michele Roberts, and that's it. That's the cover. And it follows a woman named Josephine, or it starts with her as a young girl, and she grew up in a very religious family. Her mother had 15 children, but she didn't want to. Her father made her. And Josephine's father was very religious and forced her to know a bunch of prayers and be super pure and stuff. And then Josephine, her mother died due to complications in childbirth, so she was stuck with her father. And then Josephine got in trouble with her cousin Magdalena, and so her father sent her off to boarding school. But her father still wanted her to get married, so he tried to find a husband for her. But she didn't want to get married. She wanted to join the convent because she felt that that was the only way to atone for her sins. So she ran away to the convent and joined the convent, and she was 15 years old when she did this, so very young. And so she didn't really know the big decision that she was making. And this upset her father a lot, but he grew to accept it. And she stayed there for 20 years, and when she first got there, she was a young nun, so she lived in the dormitory with others, and she did that as a form of penance because her father could afford to send her to a room by herself, but she didn't want to do that. And then she stayed there for 20 years, and during those 20 years, her father died, but she missed it because she didn't ask permission to go visit him, so she couldn't see him while he was sick. And her brother left his daughter with her, and so her name was Isabel, and she lived with her as if she was Josephine's child, so Josephine took care of her and stuff. And and then Isabel and Josephine both grew to want to leave the convent. During her time at the convent, Josephine met a priest named Lucien, and Lucien grew to be her really good friend, and so she would go to him for advice. And eventually she began, after her father's death, she began to lose her faith in her vocation. So she went to Lucien, asked him what to do, and he suggested that maybe she spend a little bit of time away from the convent because maybe that's what she needed, because the convent life was growing very tiring for her. So she went to go live with her cousin Magdalena, and she had taken a much different path than Josephine. So when she went to live with her cousin, she found out that she hosted salons and parties every night for money, and she hosted it with very famous people and a lot of people. So Josephine starts to join in with these parties because she's not a nun anymore because she left the convent. So she would put on a dress and go party, and a lot of times her friend that she made in the convent, Lucien, would come to the parties also, and eventually he became her lover. And he was still a priest though, and so Isabel grew up during this time also, so she became about 16, which was older than the time that Josephine entered the convent. So Josephine wanted Isabel to make that decision for herself, but also know what a big decision it would be. And Isabel was not the same as Josephine because Josephine was much more religious, but Isabel didn't really care about that, and she was a little bit more active in these parties. And so Josephine, one night, her, Lucien, and Magdalena were all sitting on the couch, and Josephine was talking about how she should create a new convent where there were two halves of a house. So one half could be a formal traditional convent where they practiced celibacy, and they prayed all the time and stuff, like in a normal convent. And the other half would be like like they could do what they want in the other half, but they would celebrate it more. Yeah, you know, and they thought that Magdalena and Lucian both thought that this was a very good idea, so Magdalena offered to pay the first year's rent and find the house. So they eventually did find the house, and after a few years of living in the house, Josephine died of cancer, but she still managed to do a lot of what she hoped to do, which was help to create a little bit more freedom for those who didn't really have any other place to turn, but wanted to celebrate life and God. And so she died of cancer, but after she died, they found out that her body, it was incorrupt like a saint's, so it didn't decay, and it like smelled like flowers. And so however, an incorrupt body would normally be seized by the Vatican, so instead they cut her up and distributed her to churches around the world. But they didn't know that they didn't know that the inspectors, which was the authority of the church in that part, suspected what they were doing, and so they got in trouble, and the convent was eventually shut down. But I forgot to mention at the very beginning that there's a spider. Michele Roberts, in between the stories, the chapters of Joseph, there's a spider right there. In between the chapters, talking about the life of Josephine, she also talked about the lives of saints that are very popular female saints, but she changed them up a little bit to where, because I'm sure we all know, growing up in Catholic school, female saints have always been the best example of piety and stuff. But she made these saints a little bit more outgoing in certain things, and so it goes to the theme that saints should be able to celebrate life. Okay, so that's the end of my summary for the book. And some of the themes that I explored in my research was the oppression of women in the Catholic Church. It's still seen in the modern day, but it was obviously very prevalent in the book in the times that the book was written. So they were expected, like Beatrice, Josephine's mother, had to have 15 children because her husband forced her to, because he wanted a lot of children. And she was expected to take care of and clean the house and take care of the family. And also, women in that time, but also now, they don't have a lot of options for leadership in the Catholic Church. Really, all they can do is become a nun if they want to explore religious life. And as I'll get to later, conditions in the convent are not good. So there's a lot of cases of unreported abuse in the convent, but a lot of people don't leave out of fear for their souls, really, because they feel guilty that if they leave, they're going against God's calling for them. And a lot of the abuse goes unreported, also out of fear of their superiors. This is a big theme in the book because all of the saints and Josephine and Isabel and all the women in the book are shamed for their impulses, but Roberts comes up with the idea that women should celebrate this part of their life, and that's really what should make them a saint, and that's what she showed in all the stories of the saints that she made, is them celebrating their sexuality. And also the patriarchy in the Catholic Church, which is very, it's very prevalent, as you guys know, because really the Catholic Church has a male authority and that's it. And so when women join the Catholic Church, not even the convent, but in the Catholic Church, they create their identity often based off of the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church has an all-male authority, so the male authority is pretty much dictating the identity of the woman, and their identity disappears in a way. And that's it.
All right.